we have with us a local speaker. I think we all enjoy local history, and it's always interesting when local history is involved with national history and world history. Of course, World War II was a world war, and we have had wonderful programs. We had Carl Schmidt a couple of years ago about Iwo Jima, and he was recently in the paper last week with some other Iwo Jima survivors. Tonight we have with us Sharon Clemens. Sharon and Butch, right? Are from, that's not it?
That's it.
Okay, and Butch are from Groveland. They have the Farm Grove Restored Barn, and they have a little chapel where there are weddings occasionally, and they've had an antique business and a tea room, and they're quite the entrepreneurs, and Sharon's very generous to take time to come and tell us about her father's experience in World War II in the Pacific. So, Sharon Clemens.
I told Sue that when I had the opportunity, I wanted to also bring the counterpane that I had shown in my Cottage Chat newsletter. And so I just brought it for fun, and it is 175 years old. It was a quilt that my great-great-grandmother grew.
A little closer to the microphone.
Okay. My grandmother grew the flax, carded it, and wove it. So if you'd like to look at that afterwards, feel free to do that. So it is 175 years old from, we think it was Cadiz, Ohio, that it came from. The family heirlooms are so precious. But tonight we're going to talk about World War II. I've been able to sit down with my father and get his take on the war in recent years. And it's all the much more interesting because, as you know, the World War II veterans are fast fading. My father himself is 88 years old. He is still living, but he has forgotten a lot of these details himself and would prefer not to talk about it in person. But he was one of those in the generation of the last Great War. We look back on that now with nostalgia and patriotism. I think it was a time of unprecedented unification of the country. And when my father talks about the war, he always says, "Oh, but I didn't do that much," because his brother was a medic on Iwo Jima and saw most of his unit die. But he was a metalsmith. And so his journal, which I think is very precious, is just a Swabi's account of Great Lakes Naval Station, where he was in boot camp, to the islands of Guam and Saipan in the South Pacific. What is interesting about this journal is that it is written up to the very end of the war. He was on the islands when war was proclaimed. He was on the islands when the South Pacific theater really started to heat up. He was on the islands when the bombs were dropped. He was on the islands repairing the bombers that were assaulting the Japanese mainland. I found this on the internet, and this is a World War II bomber. And such bombers as these are the ones that they actually repaired in his metal shop, and he was a skilled metal worker, which is why he didn't fight in the war, but he had a totally different calling. This is a picture of Erwin Elias Towne, who wrote this journal, in very simple terms. And Sue, if I could give this to you, maybe, or someone, and we can just pass these around to put a face with the journal. My father wrote this journal from 1943 when he was drafted to 1945. And during that time, he kind of had a circuitous route to get from Illinois out to California and then to the South Pacific. Is there anyone here tonight who was in World War II that would relate to this? But we all definitely can remember those who were or had parents who were. It seems like it's such a war that we all know a lot about, even if we didn't have first-hand knowledge, because it kind of shaped the generation that we are today. My father always had an interest in flying. When he came home, he really wanted to fly. He almost got his pilot's license, did not. So when he couldn't finish high school because of a learning disability, his parents told him, "Erwin, you had better get a skill because you're going to be drafted. and you're going to go into the war, and if you do have a skill, you'll be able to choose the branch of the service you want to go into. So they sent him to a trade school up near Chicago, and he became a metal worker. When he was drafted in 1943, yes, he got to basically determine which branch of the service, which was the Navy. His father was in the Navy, actually in World War I. And he decided he wanted to do something with planes because that was his passion. It starts on June 2nd, 1943. Boot Camp, Great Lakes, Illinois. At noon today, I was sworn into the Navy at the Navy Center in Chicago. I came from Pekin with 100 other 18-year-olds last night. Was given our exam this morning, and I had my pick, so I took the Navy, provided I be put into the aircraft work. June 15th. Our CO was looking for a bugler, so I took the job. My duties are getting the men up, getting them to chow, and putting them to bed. During the day, I play in our drum and bugle corps. We play for colors morning and evening, and even for graduation of the company. And for me, this is a lot of fun because I played in the Sons of the Legion a few years back. This is a picture of Erwin as the bugler. My father is of the turn of mind that he didn't realize he'd probably be one of the hated young men in the Navy, but he loved the bugle. I'll pass this around to you. Because he was a skilled metal worker, he was given by choice the opportunity to go to Norman, Oklahoma for 21 weeks of specialized schooling. So he went from the Great Lakes Naval Training Center out to Norman, Oklahoma for those 21 weeks with about 30 other metal workers. He said our draft was read off this morning. We will be leaving this evening on the L to Chicago, and there a good night's sleep on a sleeper train. He loved the train. You have to remember, these young men often had never gone anywhere or done anything until the war. And then they saw the world and had all kinds of experiences that changed them forever. September 2nd, we are well on our way now. During the night, our train picked up 2 carloads of waves. The cars were well guarded. That was to keep the men away from the waves, by the way. But when we stopped for chow, they would let us eat with them. There were 3 waves to each one of us. They would sit at the table, and one of us would complete the foursome. It was fun while it lasted. And then to Norfolk, Virginia. And as you know, Norfolk was a shipping out place. This is March 29th, 1944. After getting a good checkout on PBMs and PBYs, I am now on a draft with 300 other men going to Fleet Air Wing 14, San Diego, California. So then it was a cross-country trip on troop trains. Along the way, he talked about the fact, now, my father was a good Lutheran boy from Pekin. And his mother was the daughter of generations of strong, staunch Lutheran ministers. And Erwin was not to drink, gamble, play cards, no womanizing, nothing. And I have to honestly tell you, I don't think he did. I honestly don't think he did. And he would talk about the boys getting off the train even when there was a 15-minute stop to go find whiskey. Erwin never did that. April 3rd, pulled into LA early, ate chow and had 3 hours all to himself. I went for a walk down through town to see the city. We then got on a streamliner, that was special to him, and pulled into Diego. They called San Diego, Diego. Late afternoon, April 5th. We are being transferred to Camp Kearney, about 9 miles out of Diego. It's a B-24 training base. I was put in the sheet metal shop, was given my first day off as soon as I got there. Went to see Cliff at Camp Pendleton, about 30 miles up the coast. This is very interesting. At least 5 times he talks about the fact that between California and the Saipan Islands, he saw his older brother, who was a Marine, 5 times. And he saw his brother on the way to Iwo Jima, and he saw his brother when he came home from Iwo Jima on Saipan. Pendleton is about 30 miles up the coast. I thumbed up and back. I didn't know, or Cliff didn't know I was around. We had a good talk. They're both drafted, one in the Marines and one in the Navy. May 31st, 1944. At Kearney, they had a bad crash today. A B-24 piled up at the end of the runway. All hands were killed. The plane had 38 missions out. These were planes that were coming back for repair to the States. July 9th, 1944. My weekend off again, and off to Santa Monica I go. I went in with a friend of mine, Text. We first walked into the USO to find a big surprise. Cliff standing by the door. He just got back from his leave, and this was the leave before he shipped out. And he had a lot to tell. For one, he had gotten engaged to Noreen. This is Noreen Hilston in Pekin. That made me very happy. Now, the story to that is the fact that my Uncle Clifford married one sister and my father married the other. When my father came home, he married Noreen's sister, Frances, and that's how I came to be. We went upstairs, watched the dancing a while, then to the Army Rec for a night's sleep. July 19th. I went to the beach and met a gal from Santa Monica, Jonesy. We talked all afternoon. I asked her for a date and she accepted. We went to the Palladium in Hollywood, the best dancing place around. Jimmy Dorsey and his boys were on hand to pep things up. The place is very large and well crowded each night. This Pekin boy was really getting an education. But still, he was going with Frances and Jonesy was just a friend. August 7th, 1944, another Jeep carrier came in with 50 more planes. We have already 100 to work on. We will put them all back in service and they will be used for training only. Most of the ships have Jap planes to their credit. And they would put, of course, the marks on the side of the plane to show how many kills they had. August 27th. They had to give us today off for another carrier is coming in. No work will be done till she gets here. I went into town and spent the day like I have been doing the last 8 weeks. I talked to the same gals on the beach. Hard at work now that the carrier is in. We are working hard to keep up the pace. At noon, the PV outfit and most of CASU 47, I don't know what that is, pulled out for Mariloma Strip, only 10 miles away. What's left will carry on the work of commissioning these old planes. As you know, in World War II, especially in the beginning, we were getting everything flying that we could because America was really not prepared to go to war. 1944, October 8th. This will be our last liberty, that is in the States. He talks about getting a box from home from my Aunt Louise, his aunt. And it was filled with all kinds of homemade food and a camera, and he had a lot of fun taking pictures. Then he says, on the bus to LA, I took pictures all that night, stopped at the USO for the dancing the next day, went to the beach in Santa Monica. And that afternoon, we again went to LA and Hollywood. Took in the blackouts of 1944, which was an old movie. Caught the bus in front of NBC Studios. We got back 4:30 in the morning. He had a big night the night before they shipped out. Shipping out, October 27th, 1944. An RB band gave us a grand send-off, which I won't forget. They played popular numbers, and sometimes it's hard to read. As we were moving up, they played Anchors Aweigh. Quite a thrill. With a full speed ahead, we are doing a good clip. We are all by ourselves. Only a DE, which I think is a destroyer escort, was out front, October 30th. This morning, our ship turned around and started back to the States. Later, we got the word that 2 ships like ours, troop carriers, were torpedoed only 100 miles ahead of us, so we must stay safe and steer clear. November 1st, he described the thrill of being at sea and seeing things like porpoises and the flying fish. November 2nd, 1944. This is his account of pulling into Pearl Harbor. and I find this very poignant. See what you think. Pearl Harbor is a sight. Pulled into the bay at 10 o'clock, all hands had to go below deck. Don't know why, but we had to. We anchored at the far end of Ford Island. The planes for the strip there pass right over our ship, making a constant roar all the time. We were taken to a recreation park where we could swim and play ball, drink Cokes. I'm wondering if they didn't allow or have all of the men go below deck so they wouldn't see the devastation, because after all, they were about to go into it. November 11th, pulled out today at 2 o'clock sharp. 3 other ships joined us, all troop carriers. We also have 3 DEs out in front to protect us. Our goal is Guam, November 14. Today we got our first scare. We were called to general quarters 2 times. I think our DE picked up a few subs out there. We are keeping in close formation with the main ship in the middle. We're on the left. November 17. Skipped a day today. Went across the international date line at 2 o'clock last night. 1944, November 19th. We are passing through the Marshall Islands. Last night we passed one of the islands and it was lit up like a Christmas tree. It had an airstrip on it and the planes were flying thick around it like birds to their nest. November 30th. Guam came into sight this morning early. It took us some time to pull into the harbor, for only 1 ship can go in at a time. We went ashore this afternoon, got in a truck, and headed for the field. November 30th. After a few days of getting rested and settling back, we finally got to work. This morning we have a good working area. Our shop is a large Quonset hut, 100 by 40. We are working on fighter planes, December 4th. The mosquitoes are pretty thick here. They are small and only cause a small fever at first, but you get used to it in time. The stockade where I am working is near a thicket. We must have guards around all the time. There are still quite a few Japs in the heavy undergrowth. December 10th. Had my first watch last night. While I was standing my post, a Marine in a wooded area only a few hundred yards away cut loose with his submachine gun. I ran over there to see what happened, or even to help, but it was so dark that I couldn't even see, so I stood clear and stayed my ground. Never did find out who was killed. This is interesting. December 17th. This is still 1944. The chief knew that I was pretty good at small work, metal work. So he gave me a pattern of a star, which I have to make out of thick aluminum for the Admiral's Jeep. This is 5-star Admiral Nimitz. Quite an honor to do such work, making stuff for other big shots as well. He actually made the 5 stars for General Nimitz's Jeep. And you know that he was the only 5-star admiral. I have an article on him up here if you would like to see it. Guam, 1944, December 22nd. This morning, just before I got up, there was a very bad explosion, knocking us all very much. Got dressed and went to the end of the strip where it happened. It was a TBF coming in for a landing, and in the midst of a rain, it missed the runway. She slid in, hitting some more TBF, parked in that area, and started to burn. The pilot got out with his gunner and started running fast to an embankment when the explosion occurred. No one was hurt, but the pilot was thrown to the deck. The blast blew up 7 other ships and put 4 others out of commission. All were placed ready to go and belonged to one same squadron. December 24, Christmas Eve. We find it very quiet around here. I went swimming this morning and also looked for shells this evening. Went to a stage show that Acorn put on. The different units would put on different shows for the other men, as well as having entertainers come in. Sang Christmas carols afterward. December 25, went to church. and had to work the rest of the day. A Jap camera plane was over the island all day. They didn't spot it till it started away. Came here from Rota. Rota was a nearby island about 100 miles away that was still held by the Japanese. Before these young men moved into the South Pacific, they had taken Guam and Saipan from the Japanese, but Rota was still in their hands. Guam, 1945, January 10. Had an air raid tonight in the midst of our show. We all spread out like water on a flat rock. It lasted for 15 minutes. Later, we found out it was a B-24 coming back from a mission with its radio shot out. It couldn't radio the tower, so the radar picked it up as an enemy plane. January 15. While a group of new pilots were flying their F-6Fs, I think that's F-6 fighters, in a gunnery hop here near Rota today, they spotted a Jap dive bomber. They all jumped on it and downed it. 1945, February 4. Nimitz's plane flew over the strip. His plane is a C-54, and he has an escort of 8 F-6 fighters, 4 on each side. Each pilot is an ace, too. Nimitz keeps all his planes, 3 of them, at our strip. Our men also take care of them. February 12th. Last night, our planes saw 6 Jap loading barges coming onto our beach. They came from Rota, 40 miles or so east of there. The planes strafed the ships, but a lot of them got ashore and into the jungle before they could get them all. There are quite a few Japs on this island, for most of Guam is covered with jungle, plenty of hiding places. February 25th. Today, being my regular day off, is a day I won't forget for some time. At 3 o'clock this afternoon, an F-4U crashed into our metal shop, killing the pilot and burning very badly 10 of our metalsmiths. The plane went through the tool room, and the man in it was lucky he even got out. We also lost an F-6 fighter in the fire. 6 men were outside the shop. The plane just missed them all by 10 feet. The poignancy of that is that that was not the day my dad was there. 1945, March 4th. I found out that I am to leave soon. He's going to be shipped over to Saipan. Took off in a heavy rain. There are only 47 of us going today. We stopped at Tinian for a short while to let off a few men, pick up a few, went off again. It's only a 5-minute hop on to Saipan. We landed at our field, Kobler Field, and were taken to an area about 1.5 miles from the strip on the beach. We live in tents here, 6 to each tent. Chow is very good. March 25th, the B-29s had a big raid last night. They are coming in today. We watch each one from our metal shop at our strip to see if anything is wrong. Many a ship comes back with only 3 engines going. The B-29 strip is only a 1/4 mile from our strip. All B-29s must pass over our field to hit there. All crash landings come in on our strip. In other words, if they didn't make it to the good strip, they would basically crash land at theirs. I'm going to tell you at this point that we're in the March section of 1945. The Battle of Iwo Jima took place in February and March of 1945. So as he's writing these, his brother is on Iwo Jima. April 13, completed all the 47s in a shorter time than expected, and did such a good job that our outfit got a citation for it. A little later, we will do some work of this kind again, being that we are just outside of the forward area. All this kind of work must be done here. They were patching them up and sending them right back out. 1945, May 3rd. We have a group of night fighters at our strip now. As they were taking off this morning on a small hop, one of them turned over on the takeoff. She burned pretty bad, but the crew of 3 got out okay. The ship only had 50 hours on her. May 5th, when I went to bed last night, I noticed a red glow in the western sky today. Today I found out what happened. At Tinian, a group of Japs that had been hiding out in the hills came down on the B-29 strip, killed a few guards, and set 3 B-29s on fire. Most of the Japs were killed later, but we lost a lot with those 3 ships. This evening it was pretty busy out, and our 29s were just coming in from Tokyo. While the ships were cutting over the field, one made too wide a turn and hit the mountain peak. She burned in a few minutes. All hands went with it. May 8th, at our strip we are having a bit of hard luck now, too. We lost 4 ships in the last 10 days. A 47 went off the runway this morning. No one hurt. The place is filled with wrecked planes. May 14th. This afternoon, our B-29s came back from the biggest raid yet over Japan. Now, you see, after Iwo Jima, it was really starting to heat up in the World War II. Over 600 ships went out to hammer them. They came back this afternoon. 4 of them had to make landings on our strip. I was working out in front of the shop when one came by. It was looking for a parking place, so I took it upon myself to bring her in by sign talk. It's quite a thrill doing this. You see, the pilot must obey you. So he puts all the steering in your hands. One of those ships had its tail gun shot up so it wouldn't shoot. May 16th, I'm sorry. Last night at 10 o'clock when lights went out, the 29s were taking off for another raid. At 10:30, a big glow lit up the sky in the west. We found out today that 4 B-29s piled up as they were taking off. The lead, or the load is so great that they just got off, and that was all. June 16th, 1945. A year ago today, this rock was secured from the Japs. Then it was said that it would be impossible for the Yanks to build an airfield big enough for a B-29. Well, last night, they showed the Japs where they were wrong. Only a few B-29s were left at the field. All the rest were out giving them all they got where it hurt. June 21st. Today, the Army killed 28 Japs and captured 50 up in the hills here. They have 50 more surrounded. We can see the tracer fire from our camp area at night. June 22nd, Saipan. This morning at 6, before we went to work, a 29 made a crash landing at our strip. She had twin engines gone, so had to come in fast. When she hit, her tires blew out, throwing the ship out of control. She went from one side of the strip to the other and finally ended up hitting a deep ditch, which resulted in the ship breaking in 2. The pilot and 1 gunner got hurt. The ship didn't burn, but it missed one of our shops by only a few feet. June 25th. 2 groups of P-47s came in today from the European theater of war. Their pilots had their 30-day leave and then headed out here. They will only stop overnight, then go on up forward. Also, 20 B-25s came in from Italy Air Group that operated out of Europe. They will go with the P-47s up front. It's interesting, he notes that on July 4th, they celebrated by showing the guys again a movie, and for their fireworks, some of the planes dropped flares over the island. He said it was very pretty. I wondered that he wasn't tired of seeing fire in the sky at that point. July 19th. This is just 18 days before the bomb is dropped on Hiroshima. The Big Shots B-24 Saipanda came in today and parked on our ramp. She brought 2 generals, Paul McNutt and 10 other high-ranking officers. They are here for a conference. They went back to Guam the same afternoon. We take care of this B-24 with other planes. So they were gathering on Saipan in Guam, July 19th, 18 days before the bomb. July 26th. Our F-4Us went out on an early morning hop this morning. Each ship had 50 caliber ammunition shooting at a target in the water. While one F-4U was coming in, it exploded. The pilot didn't get out. This is 6 days to the first bomb, August 1st. This evening, while I was at the Strip, the B-29s were warming up for their biggest raid yet. 850 of them from these 3 islands, that would be Saipan, Guam, and Tinian, are really going to give it to them tonight with all fire. All ships that can fly will make the trip from our Strip. I am told that about 260 will leave from here and the rest from the other Strip. August 3rd. This morning, our planes from our Strip made a first strike. It was made on Rota, only 100 miles from here. All the planes that could fly from the squadron, including F-6 fighters, F-4Us, TBMs, SB-26s. They took rockets, 500-pound and 100-pound bombs. When they came back, we found out they really ran those Japs all out of that island. There are about 1,000 of them there. You understand that was the slang they used for the enemy in World War II. We don't use it today, but it is written as a young Navy man would write it. August 6th. This one I think is really poignant because this is what he wrote the day that the bomb was dropped on Hiroshima. This evening, I went to Tinnipeg, the seaplane base, to see the Charles Ruggles show. The show was very good, and he had a great cast, 3 fellows, 4 girls, and all. The show lasted an hour. There were about 7,000 men there in all. See, the men didn't know what was going on. In fact, it was a big secret until it actually happened. And then he talks about the Eddie Bracken show on August 8th, and then on August 9th, the secret, of course, couldn't be kept. And on August 9th, the bomb was dropped on Nagasaki. And he writes, Russia is now in the war with us. She is already fighting and doing very well. The second atomic bomb was dropped on Japan. No reports yet. August 11, 2 days after that, Japan just handed a peace offer to the USA. Our big shots are now getting their heads together to see what can be done. We'll know before very long. And he has a page in the journal, it has a big X through it, and at the top it says, bad dope, with 3 exclamation points. And this was a big disappointment. August 12th, 1945. This afternoon at 13:30, the MA came around to each tent telling us that the war is over and that no arms should be fired by order from the captain. I was swimming at the time, and while all was quiet, a sudden burst of whistles let loose from the ships in the harbor, and flares were shot up. Our camp area did as the captain ordered and stayed quiet, except a few howls and hoots now and then. Last night, when Japan offered peace with us, most all hands thought that the war was over then, and about 0100 this morning, all hands got up and started shouting and making all kinds of noise. We didn't get much sleep. The announcement was given to us, and later it will be let out in the States. The reason for that is so that all these islands will know when to stop firing. The question is now, how long will we have to stay out here? Squadron 92 will be here till September. If we have to take care of them yet, remains to be seen. We just heard an announcement from the States that they still don't know that it's over here. 2 days later, on August 15th, or 3 days later, the 12th was a bad mistake. Today is the day the Japs surrendered to us. VJ Day will come a little later on. This morning at 0500, the word came to us over the news from the States. As soon as the newscast was over, the skipper called all hands around him, and he told us what he could that would happen. The squadron would have to leave first before anyone or any much else could happen. They won't go till sometime in September. Till then, our work will just go on as before. This afternoon, all hands were let off work to go to the to the beer party, which will help celebrate a little. All hands were to get 3 cans free, but they got more. This evening, the camp area is filled with drunk men laying all over the place. There were fights also, but all in all, the fellows have a right to be happy, but not drunk. No sidearms were fired this evening, but didn't get much sleep because of the drunks. There will be a lot of men that won't be at work tomorrow, but I bet the chiefs won't care. They want and feel the same about going home as we do. August 20th. Today, the party of Japs that were told to fly to a small island off Japan to meet an American plane to take them to Manila came on time. They are now in conference for the second day. Won't know for sure yet when VJ Day will be, Victory in Japan. They have yet to sign any paper to the surrender of arms. The next day, he says, my partner and I won the Kobler Field Horseshoe Championship. Isn't it interesting how you try to be normal in time of war? September 2nd. Today is a big day out here. For one, it's VJ Day, and a lot of things are going on. This morning, we all heard the surrender coming over shortwave. Then later, the President, Truman, talked, and MacArthur and Nimitz said a few words. The fleet is sitting in Tokyo Bay now, putting our troops on the Japanese homeland. Things are going according to plan. September 15. At noon today, I got a letter from Cliff. He is sitting out here in the harbor in a ship going to Japan. He was going out there on leave. So there's a story about how he grabbed a Jeep, drove to the other side of the island, caught a skiff, went out to this big destroyer, got on board to see his brother, and was on board so long that the ship was pulling out and he was still out there on this ship. So he had to jump off the ship, down the rope ladder, and catch the swell at the right moment, and got on a garbage scow headed back to harbor in order to get off the ship. He nearly went home with his brother. This is a sad one. Now the war is over. This is October 5th, and peace was several weeks ago, and he says, had a very bad storm today, was blown out of our sacks at 5 this morning. We all had to report to the strip to tie down planes. We then saw the B-29 that had crashed near our strip at 2 o'clock. 20 men were on her going home. She had come from Japan and was taking prisoners of war, passengers, home. Only 1 man is expected to live. 16 others were killed outright. October 13. Today we had an inspection on the ramp of the strip, being that there is very little aircraft work now, and they have to think of something for us to do. Starting Monday, we will start clearing out our bone pile. I think that's all of the spare parts, tearing off all the wings and hauling it all away. We can't leave this base till this job is complete. A Marine Air Group will leave this week sometime. They will go aboard a flat-top home. His last entry is December 17th. He had the date December 25 down as well, but nothing is written there. I think he was so excited to get home, he stopped writing. December 17th. Went up for a 2-hour hop today in a PV, a plane. There were 4 of us from the metal shop along. We flew most of our time over Tinian and the last 15 minutes over Saipan. So one of his last memories of where he spent the war was from the air. I'd like to show you now a little bit of a 16 millimeter film that has been put on a DVD. My father brought this back from Saipan, which is a pretty good trick because you weren't supposed to bring anything back from the war. And he said when he went through customs, he just put this pack with a 16 millimeter film in it down and went through and came back and got it later. And then getting on the train going home, he put it in a locker at the train station. He took this film with a gun camera that he salvaged from a bomber. Go ahead there. I'll just say a few words about it as we go. Some of it is a little blankish because When you're trying to take movies with a gun camera, there's no sight because you don't have a focus or a sight. So he was just guessing that what he was pointing at was getting on film. He went to his chief, and his chief actually even gave him film for the camera and didn't ask him what he was going to do with it. You can see here that Erwin is trying to water ski. In between working, they had the beaches of the South Pacific right there. During his time over there as well, he made quite a bit of money doing bracelets and necklaces and watch bands for the young men to send back home to their wives and sweethearts. And he said it started out making a watch band for himself because everything in the South Pacific, if it was a leather band or a cloth band, would rot because of the seawater and the environment there. So he started making hammered metal, steel watch bands and bracelets that were salvaged from the bomber parts. And he sent so much money home doing this that his father sent him a letter and said, "Erwin, stop gambling." And with that money, when he went home and proposed to my mother, they used that money to put a modest down payment down on their first home. These are pictures of some of the guys in the Navy. It's from 1945. I believe this is Guam because they had the huts in Guam. They only had tents on Saipan. And this, unfortunately, he tried to take a picture inside the Quonset huts, the bomber huts where they were repairing the bombers. This is kind of a pan of his station. If you can see quickly, there's a few better pictures of it. He actually is taking pictures of the destroyers and such out in the harbor. That's why they didn't want anybody taking pictures in case it would fall into Japanese hands. And that was why it was so dangerous that that Japanese plane, camera plane, was coming over that day. It was trying to assess the military strength on the islands. There they are in the harbor. The South Pacific Islands, the harbors were full of the ships fighting in the South Pacific theater of the war. And Nimitz was over it all. I think this is before one of the shows. They did a lot of that for the men. They also had what they call Coke nights. And that was when the guys would get as much Coke as they wanted to drink. My dad said a lot of them also had something to spike the Coke with. It's one of the, I don't know if that's a destroyer, it looks like, or a cruiser, maybe a cruiser. They were beautiful islands. The ocean fascinated him. He had never seen it before. There's one really interesting shot where they're shipping out, shipping home, and there's a glimpse of my father petting the company dog. They had a dog mascot, and they were taking him home with him, and I always wonder whether that dog actually made it to the States or not, whether they allowed him. But he got on board the ship. There he is, Erwin. There he is again. Some of the private cruisers and such would pull up along the ships and wave to the guys. That is the Golden Gate Bridge. You can see it in the mist. Port of Deep Embarkation, I think it was called. He takes a lot of shots of the bridge. I mean, that was the first thing that belonged to the United States that they saw. He said it was quite moving to see the bridge come into view, and it was very misty that morning. And these are welcoming ships. They're welcoming the troop ships home. Welcome home, San Francisco, port of embarkation. He said there would be bands, people there waiting on the docks to welcome them in. There's that one famous tower, the Carolinian Tower, I think it's San Francisco, in one of these shots. There it is. No shot of Alcatraz, though. A lot of smiling faces. A lot of ships in the harbor, already back. If this is San Francisco. There are some interesting shots coming up, too, of downtown San Francisco, and it's interesting because of how it looked during the war. If you've ever seen pictures, you know that there were just patriotic banners and advertisements for the Red Cross and the USO, and our country was completely involved in war. Some of the people waiting at the dock. My father would yet have to take a train back home to Pekin, Illinois from San Francisco before he was totally home. Another shot of Golden Gate, but with warships. There were a lot of pleasure ships that were used as well for the war. Cruise ships. Men waiting to go ashore. This is kind of interesting, and I thought at first, well, Dad, why did you take so many pictures of just the park and ducks and water? And well, he hadn't seen Normal for 2 years, and he took these pictures of ducks and people just walking in the park and having a picnic. Normal American things to do. Bowling on the green. Very civilized. The cars, look at the cars. More ducks. Ducks, normal ducks, and actually feed a duck to children. Didn't have to worry about somebody in the bushes. I think that's a trolley. I think that's streetcar. No, that would be a trolley. What are those? Those are the electric trains, aren't they? See the Red Cross banners in the streets? It was all about the boys in the war. That's enough, Becky. And the lights, if we could. Thanks, Sue. I wanted to show you this before I forget. I mentioned that my father, as a metal worker, would make things for the boys to send home. And I have this bracelet that he made on, I don't know if it was Guam or Saipan, actually. But a couple years ago, I had him inscribe it. So he put in here, World War II, P-51 steel, 1940. I think that's 1944. Can't read that very well. Erwin, Towne. But it's a beautiful bracelet. It makes me feel like Wonder Woman when I'm wearing it, and I actually think you probably could deflect bullets with it because it's P-51 steel. And I'll pass this around to Sue because it's really just an interesting piece to see the kind of work that he did that went into Admiral Nimitz's stars. I wanted to share with you, too, before I close, that I was really intrigued by my dad's journal. And I used it to write a book. I do write fiction, Door County fiction love stories. The latest one is Timeless. And I love time travel and time stories, past and present. And what this enabled me to do is, in this story, there's a World War II love story. And in the future, it is resolved by the great niece of the woman who lost her love in World War II. So in order to tell the story, I used the letters that they wrote each other. And they found the letters that David had written in World War II. And then they found Eulalie and got her letters, and they had to be melded together to tell the story. So this gave me the timeline. So in Timeless, I actually used the dates of my father's entries and even some of the accounts that he talks about, like his metal shop being hit by a bomber and several of the men that were burned. And he said, "Oh, Lee, maybe you're right. Destiny means that I'm going to make it through this war." Well, he didn't make it through the war. And that was something she had to resolve to herself. So Timeless allowed me to kind of dedicate this book to my father's journal and also to my husband's service in Vietnam. So it was a very special project for me. I do have these books available if you're at all interested. Are there any questions or comments before we close? Anything at all?
Very interesting. Very interesting.
Good. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Feel free to come and take a look at these things, and we'll put the other things back up here. If you'd like to look at some of the other entries, you're more than welcome to do that. Yes, sir.
I'm Lee Souder, grew up in Fremont. My first cousin, Charles Vessler, lived just about 3 blocks north of here. He was wounded on Saipan. So that was kind of what brought me here.
I'm so glad you came. Thank you for your cousin's service in the war.
He survived, but I mean, he got injured pretty bad.
Yes. Anything else?
What made you think to ask your father? Because you had a journal, or because you were a writer?
To ask him about that time?
To fill it in more.
You know, he has been telling stories about it for quite some time, but then I had never really gotten his journal, and as he's gotten older, he realizes he needs to commit these things into my keeping so I know where everything is. And so then I read it, and I asked him to clarify several things. And I even, if you want to look, I even put some of the snapshots of him with his buddies on Saipan in here so I could document it all together. You know how important it is to do this. Being at the Historical Society, you really understand that. And most of their time on Saipan and Guam was spent in just shorts because it was so hot. And when they weren't working, they were in the water. So I started to put it all together, and that's what gave me the idea for the book, is because I was pulling it all together so I could keep it in one place. And then it was just a couple years ago that he decided to take these 16mm shots and get them put on a DVD, because he said, "Oh, remember that 16mm I have, and I haven't seen that for so long." And we said, "Well, Dad, you know, you can get that put on a DVD." And this technology was foreign to him. And so he found somebody to do that. And then we sat down and we watched them, and I thought, wow. There's not too many things like this that have survived. And so I wanted to put it together. So I really appreciate Sue asking me here so that I could share that with other people, because it is a precious, a precious thing to have for his service in the war, repairing bombers. Thank you so much.
I think it's a reminder that it is so important to get these stories recorded either on video or in writing, and all of the people of the past generations, nobody thinks their life is interesting, but everybody has a story to tell, so maybe we can make sure to get our family's stories recorded. I would also recommend, if you're interested in World War II in the Pacific, I would recommend the book Unbroken by Laura Hillenbrand, and it is a true story of a man who was unfortunate enough to be taken prisoner of war in a Japanese war camp, which was worse than being in a German war camp, and his true story.